Uh, we'll be discussing about Android SDK today. So we have seen in the last class, we completed the Android setup part. So we have installed the Android SDK, Eclipse. We have also installed the ADT plugin. We have installed the Java JDK, and pretty much most of the things required for setup is we have done it. So these are the things which we did basically. If you let us review what we did in the last previous thing. So we installed the JDK, and we installed JDK. We did the Eclipse. We did the Android SDK, and then we also installed the Eclipse plugin ADT, and we set up the SDK directory in Eclipse, installed various SDK component. We also created the emulator AVD, which we also call an Android virtual device. So those are the things we completed in the previous session of this Android class. Now let us go into the next session, and that is about understanding the Android SDK internals. So what all is there inside the Android SDK? But before I get into Android SDK, let me just give you a brief rundown of what are the various tools I will be using throughout this class. So one of the tool I will be using is Eclipse with ADT, and that is one. I have Android SDK installed on my laptop or computer. I have a small project plan which I will discuss about that very soon, and that project plan is basically now recently I have just inserted into this one itself, so it will not be separate document. I have a command prompt window, and I have opened one notepad. So using just these 3, 4, 5 tools, I will be explaining you all the Android concepts. So let us go ahead and start on this one. And our next is understanding Android SDK directory structure. So basically what to understand is that when you download SDK and install SDK, what are the various directories it gets created? What is inside those directories? Let us spend few minutes to understand those things. One of them is called add-on directory. Now let me just explain you a little bit about all of this directory, and we'll see what is inside each of these directory. So let me just go inside that SDK directory. So here I have Android SDK directory. Okay. Now if you see that all these directories, there is some stuff. Let us start with add-on. What is add-on? Add-on is nothing but some external set of libraries which are not the part of the core Android SDK, but is useful for developing Android applications. Now what is an example for such a external library? Well, external library, it is something like Google Map API library, Google Map library. Now, some of you might not be aware, but Google Map library is not part of the core Android SDK. It is an external library. It is not open source, and it does not come when you download SDK just. So these are the external library. Now, another example of an add-on could be that a particular mobile phone you are using for developing and debugging purpose with your computer, you want to attach it. So those are the some USB driver or some other things. So those USB drivers are few things for different manufacturers mobile phone. They are external libraries. Here I have for LG. There are 2 libraries for LG mobile phone to work with, like debug and develop on the actual LG mobile phone. If I want to debug and develop on Samsung tablet, Galaxy tablet, there are some external library required for that. If I want to do it on Sony Ericsson mobile phone, some Android development work, then there is some additional library which I need for connecting. But they are not a application logic. They are mostly for connecting your device to your this one. So they are external library. The functional part of the library are these Google APIs. They are functional kind of a library, provides you additional feature of Google Map, and that you can use it in your Android application. I will be also talking about how to use this Google API external library very soon, so just hang on with me. Now come to next is docs. Docs library, as it is obvious, it is all documentation, and every time I go to this one, I just click this index.html. Don't worry about all of that, because all of that you can go it from index.html, and here is that. So I spend quite a good amount of time here, and I will be explaining about these various things. So first is home, and which talks about installing the Android SDK. Now SDK it starts with SDK manager, and then you have to download the various platforms. I have downloaded 3.0, 2.3 and all of this. It talks about SDK tool, Google USB driver. These are the driver which you need to connect to the actual phone. Okay, and ADT plugin for Eclipse. So basically everything related to Android, this and SDK, it puts it here. Now another, in this tab there is a developer guide which is very important. It is like a very nicely written tutorial on from the development perspective, step by step, if you want to develop a particular graphics or audio video application, or some activity related thing, services you want to develop, you want to have a database related stuff, data storage. So all those things are explained in the guide format. The format is guide. This one is packages. These are some external resources like sample code, articles written by Google people and the community, some sample code, articles, tutorials, right? Now this sample codes goes back to, I will just show you, there are some interesting videos as well you can watch, and this video will also help you to understand and improve on your Android understanding. So I would strongly encourage that please go through these Android videos and watch them. They are little they are not really for the beginner, somebody who is learning Android first time, but once you learn Android, after that they are very useful and important. And most of the time they don't focus on the basics and conceptual thing. They assume that you know that, but they are pretty good. Now this tag is the blog tag, and that takes you to the special blog spot which is maintained by the Google Android team, and they write quite a good interesting thing and tricks and techniques of various things you want to do it. So this is another place where I would again recommend that you should visit sometime. So this was, I came from here, index.html. Let us go back to Android SDK. Now this extra has some additional information like extra libraries like market billing, market licensing, some USB driver. So market billing. So these are the market billing project which is provided for understanding how to do the billing in your application, Android application, and you want to sell in the market. So these are some of the extras which Google provide you as a sample. Like this one, either the sample or the library or something extra, something which does not fit anywhere else, they have just put it here. Another most important thing is platforms. Here platforms are various platforms, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 15. I will just explain about this one soon. So what happens is that each of these platforms looks like this one. So let me just okay, go back to this one. I will come to this numbering system. Some of you might not have been very clear about this, but I will come very soon. Let me just cover this. So these are the various platforms which Android has released. These are the tools which are common across all the platforms, and they are used for debugging purpose, compiling and building purpose. So AAPT is used for compiling and packaging purpose. ADB is used for debugging purpose. AIDL is Android Interface Definition Language. It is used for generating the classes from the interface. And this is to dex dump, and these are some of the other tools they use it. This one is very important. I would suggest that go into this one and look into various samples. And these samples are not just like a runtime packages, they are with full-blown complete source code. So if you want to understand that how to use a particular Android API or class, let us assume you want to know that how can I develop a Bluetooth chat application in Android, and you have nobody to help you, and you know Android basically. The best place to go is come here. Import this project which has the complete source code. See, I will show you the source code of this one. See, complete source code of this application is there. You just need to go through this source code, import this. It is a full-blown running application with project, Android manifest.xml file, all the resources, layout, everything is all ready. Now, if I want to do a Bluetooth chat application, this is the first place I will go and figure out how to do that. Now let us assume that I want to create a notepad kind of application in Android. Here is the place to come. Look into the source code again and try to read and understand all this source code written in using Android API. Okay. So that was basically the idea that samples directory is a very important directory, and whenever you are thinking about planning to do something new, try to get into that, and maybe there is something already 20% done or 50% done which you could reuse instead of reinventing the wheel. Now this is the source directory, which is the source code of Android framework. Generally I don't go there until I have become really an expert in Android, so hang on to them. And these are the system images for a particular hardware. So I don't use these two, temp. Here is the guy which is most important. If you are from a Java background, you know that in JDK there is a bin directory, and there are a lot of tools inside that directory like Java C, Java P, Java, Java H, Java Dog, lot of tools. In the same way in Android, all the tools which are across the platform and common have been put into tools directory. So this is the most important directory. I would suggest that there is no other directory here which you need to understand more importantly than this guy. So this directory, these are the tools which are very important, and you should try to understand how it works. Like various, all the SQLite 3, trace view, make SD card, layout opt, hierarchy viewer, emulator, Android, all of this. These are the important tools. Others are important as well, but these are one of the few which are very important tools. Now, do I use all these tools myself? Well, and what is the use of these tools? Okay, I know that these tools are there in tools directory, but do I use them, or what is the use? Just wait for a few minutes. I'm going to explain in details about them once I close this SDK directory structure explanation. Now here is AVD manager and SDK manager. AVD manager is used for creating Android virtual devices. So this is basically a tool which is used for creating emulator, and once and for all I would like to explain is that every time I use the word emulator, it is same as AVD, Android Virtual Device. So don't get confused if I'm using sometime this, sometime using this. And that is used for this. Is that the only way to do it? Not really. I will talk in detail about each tool. What is this? SDK Components, Tools, and Images platform images that we manage using this one. So that is what we use it. Now this is the basic understanding of each of this directory: add-ons, docs, platform tools, samples, sources, and tools, and this one. Now let us get into this one. So you can just read little bit about here. I have tried to put it. Next one. And that is where I will be talking about most of the tools which you saw in this one. You remember this one? This guys? So how to use these tools I will be talking about now. So let us get into this one. Okay. So one of the tool is called Android. What is the use of this tool? Well, this tool is basically can be used for various purpose, like to list all the emulator, what are the various emulator I have created, how to create the emulator, how to move the emulator. Next one is, if you want to create an Android project, you can create it from here itself. Let me just delete this guy. Okay, so you can create an Android project from command line itself, and these are all command line. You can list the Android, you can update an ADB or SDK, you can generate and build files. There are a lot of things. This single guy will let you do that. Why don't we just go ahead and check it out? So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to use this command line tool to see few things. First thing is that Android list AVD. So let me see Android list AVD. And it will tell me what are the various emulator I have created in the system. I have created 3 emulator: AVD231, AVD233, AVD4, and this is based on version 233, and this is based on version 403. This is based on version 2.3.1. Okay, so that was one use. What is the another use of this command line tool? I can just start a SDK manager from here itself. See, I do like this, and my SDK manager will start running. Now, okay, it should, yeah. So here it is. Now SDK manager is used to download the various, let me just collapse all of them and I will explain you. Okay, it is downloading something, so it is lit. Okay, and if you see what it is nothing but various platform: API 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Now there are two different ways, and this is where I wanted to explain you one more thing, that you might be confused that sometimes they will say Android version API 4, sometimes they will say 2.1, sometimes they will say API version 10, sometimes they will say 233. So basically this is a naming convention. These are the naming convention used for external market. So when you go in the market and try to buy a phone, they will use these versions. My phone is supporting 1.5, my phone is supporting 233. But from a developer perspective, there is a different set of version they have given, like 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and they are not repeated. So it is kind of a one-to-one mapping. Okay. And the idea was that let us use this API version so that developers are more comfortable with API version rather than the complete phone version, because they always work with the API. So that's all is the difference between these two different naming convention. Okay. And you can and so I was doing is that I was running Android, and by this I can launch the Android SDK manager. Now is this the only way to run the Android SDK manager? Not really. I can run the same tool from here, this Android SDK manager. Now you have seen that this tool, this one, is used to start the SDK manager, but I generally don't use that because Eclipse already provides a plugin. Now the next use of this command line tool is to create an AVD. Do I use this create AVD? Not really, because I can create a AVD using the Eclipse plugin, and same thing I can do it here. Android AVD manager, okay, and I can create an AVD here. So what I'm trying to tell you is that all these command line tools, all these command line tools, so these command line tools like Android, emulator, ADB, and many other tools. All of these can be used directly from command prompt, prompt, or they can be used from Eclipse IDE as well. Eclipse IDE plugin. And this ADT plugin behind the scene is using all of these guys. Okay? So Eclipse ADT plugin behind the scene, when you open the Eclipse and use those menu in the Eclipse, those are basically behind the scene are using all these command line tools. So either you can use the Eclipse ADT plugin menus and do all of these things, or you can do it from command line as well. So that is just, I wanted to give you a brief idea about how the plugin and everything works, command line tools work. So let us go into this one. So that was about Android. Now Zip Align is another command line tool which is used for APK optimization. Uh, when Eclipse is creating the final APK for deploying to the phone, Zip Align is used to make a more optimized version of APK. What is Android emulator command line tool? So this command line tool starts with a word called emulator, and you can run the particular emulator itself. In the previous one we saw the emulator manager where you can create the emulator, right? This time I am showing you how to launch a emulator itself. So you can launch it from here. You can say emulator dash avd and avd233, okay? So let us do this. It will launch an emulator, but that is not the way most of the time people do it, because most of the time people do it is that go to here AVD manager, click this one and say start. So either way you can do it. Either you can do it through the command line or you can do it through the Eclipse. It is up to you. It is what you are convenient or comfortable with. But my purpose was just to give you an idea that all of these command line tools lets you do a lot of things which Eclipse is doing for you. Hierarchy viewer is used for UI debugging purpose, and layout opt is used for similarly for optimizing the layout of your layout XML file. We'll discuss about layout XML little later. Now this one, hierarchy viewer, is a very interesting command line tool. It is used for debugging your UI. So what it does is that if you are a UI developer or in your project you are worried about that how the UIs are looking like, what are the various layouts, buttons and views, then this one you can use for UI inspection purpose. Okay. So it is especially useful for the UI developer people. Now once we are done with this one, let us go to the next one and we'll see that how it works. So Android debug breeze. This is one of the most important tool which is used really on the command prompt. All other tools which I have explained most of the time are not used, but is this one is really used. Really used in command prompt. Now, what does this tool do? What is this command line tool does? It is called Android Debug Breeze, and it has some important things which as a developer you will come across. Sometimes what happens is that your Eclipse is developed the application, APK is ready, but somehow it is not able to put it inside your emulator, or your emulator is not connecting nicely to your Eclipse. At that time you can use the ADB tool to install your application directly on your emulator. You can remove your application from emulator using this ADB tool. The second most important thing does is that you can copy files from and to the emulator. Device means emulator. Okay. Third most important thing is that it helps you to debug and see the log file. Fourth one is to forward the device ports. Let us leave the device ports, but let us focus on those first three things which are very important. So how do I use this ADB command line tool for installing application and uninstalling application? And that is useful especially when sometimes the connection between the Eclipse and the emulator just disconnects or the emulator hang. That time I use this tool. Also, copying the file from or to device emulator is very useful using this. Now let us try to do this and see some example for this one. Now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to use this tool. So let me see this. So ADB, and I want to uninstall something. When you uninstall something, when you want to uninstall something, you need to give the package name of that application which is running or is on your Android device. So let us assume that I have a device called com.isaac.ta, and I will say uninstall. Okay, it is saying waiting for device because I did not start that application virtual device. So if emulator is not running, it will not uninstall or install. So let me just run this emulator. So come here, select this, and we'll just say run emulator. And here in the console, sometime I have another tool Aptana, and that's why it is showing this. But I will select here Android, and it will tell me that it is going to run that application, launching a new emulator. That's okay. So okay, so it is going to launch a emulator. So until that emulator starts, it won't do any uninstall install. So emulator must be running. That is another good point to know. So let us come out of this. And while it is doing a uninstall install, let us see what other tools I can see. Once the emulator is running, you can install, you can uninstall, you can copy files, you can debug log and everything. We'll come back to this. While I will just say SQLite 3. What is SQLite 3? It is a command line tool. It is just like a lot of other clients or command line tools which have been provided for MySQL, Oracle, Sybase, DB2, lot of other databases. The same way, the database engine in Android also provides a command line tool called SQLite 3, which will connect to your application database in the emulator again. Remember, everything is running inside the emulator. So this is what it creates a command line connection. But here it does not connect using the user ID password. It just asks for the database instance, and then it works like that. Okay. So now our emulator is ready. So let us say this guy. Okay. Now I can use that tool called ADB. Okay. adb uninstall com.isaac.ta. I will say go ahead and uninstall it, and it will try to uninstall that one. And if you come back here, you will see that guy is gone. How to test whether that software is installed or not? Just scroll here. There was something called Traveler Assistant. Now if you want to install that tool, then you have to go to the package. So for uninstalling, you need to give the package name. For installing, you have to give the name of the APK. My APK is in this directory, Eclipse Workspace Traveler Assistant, here cd bin here. So this is the APK which I have. I want to install it. adb install traveler assistant.apk. Okay, it is going to install now, and it will say some problem. Let me just see that what happened. Oh, it has installed APK. If there is anything, you can reinstall the same thing. It doesn't create any problem. It will just override. Already exists. So what it means is that the same exact APK with the byte and everything was already there, so it did not install. Now you go here and you can run this guy, and it is running. Okay, so that is what you can do using ADB. So ADB has very interesting thing that it lets you install, uninstall your application's APK file. It can copy the files from and to the device. So let us assume that inside your emulator there is some image, there is some music file or something which you want to pull out and copy it into your C drive of your computer. How to do that? For that, ADB is again very useful. So let us see if I have a file here. There is a file called mytrace. I will delete that. So yeah, Unix command is still. So there is no file called mytrace.trace. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to pull it from my phone, and I will go mytrace.trace. Okay, it will say adb pull. So it is going to take that file and put it into my local file system, and now I have a file called mytrace.trace. Okay, so this is the way you can transfer the files from your phone to this one. There are some security restrictions which will work in a real device compared to this one, but most of the case time you should be able to do it, especially if it is SD card. It is perfectly fine. Okay, so ADB has the other uses called moving files from device. The last third one, which is most important, is to see the log file. For some of the user, when I explain this, all the SDK tools, they say this command is not working, ADB is not working, Android is not working, emulator is not working, and all this command line tool has stopped working. The most important reason why these tools do not work are because you have not set the path of this tool directory into your environment variable. And let me just bring you again that thing. If you want all of these things to work for you, none of the SDK command line tools will work from command line unless you have done the setting of the path of this directory, SDK tools. So this path must be there in the environment variable called path. If this is not there, then they will not work here. Okay, so this is where you have to put it in the end. So that is what one of the common problem I have seen, that people are not able to do that. Otherwise it works most of the time.